Hi there, my name is Brian Pagano, and I'm going to talk to you today about API first thinking. Now, when we say API first, what we don't mean is taking all the complicated things that you've built and bought over the years and somehow exposing them forward in the architecture. What we mean is that when you're trying to solve for the entire problem domain, what's sometimes called the digital value chain, you know if you don't solve for this whole thing, you haven't solved the problem. What we don't mean is starting from the back end and working your way forward along the chain. What we mean is thinking about what are the needs of the user? What do developers care about? And then leaving the nuts and bolts and complexities hidden where they should be in the back end. Now, a lot of people have a misconception when it comes to APIs that there's only one kind of API. And in reality, there are three main categories of APIs. So APIs as services, APIs as interactions or experiences, and APIs as products. Let's dive into those a little bit and see what it might mean for your organization. And I should add that you don't have to choose one or the other. Each individual API will be only one of these, but your organization will probably have all the types of APIs. Now, APIs as services are what your teams probably think of as APIs. When you say API to them, they're thinking of this, which is simply a well-governed, secure, scalable, visible means to get to back-end resources. Right? So APIs power the apps, the web apps, the mobile apps, the device apps, what have you. Applications need to get access to these back-end resources. There's a lot of good examples of how this works right now, but many companies say, well, isn't this akin to opening things up too much? What about governance? What about security? And so the obvious answer is yes. When we say API, we mean APIs hosted on an API platform, sometimes called an API management platform, something like Google's Apigee product, for example. Now, before you even bring up the statement, Brian, what about microservices? Everybody's talking about microservices. Our teams are talking about microservices. How do APIs play into this? Well, microservices are just another way of organizing software in a decomposed way that allows them to horizontally scale. But just like any kind of software resource, you need access to microservices. And when you hear access, you should be thinking APIs with a solid API platform around them. And microservices in between each other as they're communicating inter-service, they also need APIs to help ease that communication. So microservices done right means that you're thinking API first. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. Some of the most obvious is it allows you to be polyglot. It doesn't tie you to a specific language or a specific architecture or a specific backend. Now, another kind of API is API as an interaction, sometimes called API as an experience. Right? These are the kind of things that happen whenever you talk to Google Home or to the Amazon Alexa or one of those kind of things, whenever you push a button on some front-end device or your car or washing machine or what have you. Now, these kind of APIs are a little bit different, right? Because they're not usually meant for reusability. They're meant for a particular use case and a particular device and form factor. And also they differ in that they're not predominantly designed and built by back-end teams, but rather by front-end teams. So you need to think about which kind of API you're doing. And sometimes people can conflate these things and end up with these kind of Franken-APIs, Frankenstein things together, when instead you should have your outer APIs, the things that should be going to the interaction and experience, separate from your inner APIs, the kind of resource access and APIs as a service that we've been talking about, and have a mediation layer, again, an API platform to help mediate between these things and not expose the complexity of one side to the other side. Now, another way to look at APIs, another category of API, is an API as a product. And this is when a business is actually getting to a new segment or composing their goods and services and offerings in a new way and treating the API just like they would treat any other product, with the same kind of product management and design and marketing and monetization that you would have around any other kind of product. And this is a growing part of the API world. One of the key things, I think it goes without saying, is that you need KPIs, right? You need to be able to measure what it means for this thing to be successful. And there are a variety of deeper dive talks and white papers that we have that we can show you more about how to measure APIs. So we've talked about APIs as services, interactions, and products, but the one last point I want to give you is that every API exists in an ecosystem. And I know you're saying, but Brian, wait, we're doing mostly internal stuff right now. Great, internal is an ecosystem. Your company is divided into budget codes, into lines of business and departments and divisions. That is an ecosystem. And around that, you probably have partners and suppliers and wholesale chains and whatnot, and that's an ecosystem. And your industry itself is an ecosystem, and then, of course, the public ecosystem that everybody thinks in. So remember, APIs do not mean open access, free for all, right? We've opened up the gates and now anything can happen. This stuff is happening around your organization, whether you want it to or not. That's what it means to be doing business in 2017. The thing is, with an API platform, you can start to control and have visibility over what's happening throughout your organization and counterintuitively at the same time unlock speed and innovation. One of the ways you could do this is jettison some of the heavyweight governance that SOA and all the contracts required into a much lighter kind of governance that RESTful APIs require, and you can even do some of your governance enforcement and discovery through APIs. And what about all the teams around your organization that are building the same things unbeknownst to each other? Well, wouldn't it be great to use your centralized API platform as a mechanism to flag those kind of things, to stop duplicate effort and get things to market much faster? Right? Remember, APIs are not projects. They're not an IT exercise or experiment. They're products that help you to accelerate. API first is what it means to succeed in business in 2017. You can do business other ways, but if you want to be a winner empirically in 2017, you need to be thinking API first. So to wrap up, a couple tips of thinking API first. Sounds simple, but the one thing I can say is think outside in. Outside might be another department or line of business, but somebody else in your organization, what do they care about to access the things that we have, right? Know your API, think about how it's going to be used, manage these things as though they are a relationship like you would with any other product, and then cultivate that ecosystem and great things will grow. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to seeing you all in the wonderful world of APIs. Thank you.